The crystalline spires of the Galactic Council's central station gleamed against the velvet darkness of deep space, each facet reflecting the light of 1,000 distant stars. Ambassador Marcus Chen adjusted his formal dress uniform one final time before stepping through the airlock, his boots clicking against the polished deck plating with measured precision. After 6 months of intensive diplomatic training and cultural immersion, he was about to become the first human to address the full assembly of the Galactic Council. "Remember, Ambassador," his aide whispered through the comm unit embedded in his collar, "the Sylathi delegation is particularly sensitive about direct eye contact. And whatever you do, don't. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you. Make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." "Smile with teeth showing to the Corthax, I know," Marcus finished, his voice carrying the easy confidence that had earned him this posting despite his relative youth. At 32, he was the youngest ambassador humanity had ever sent to represent them on the galactic stage. "I've memorized every cultural protocol, Janet. Time to see if all that preparation pays off." The main corridor leading to the council chambers stretched before him like a tunnel of liquid silver, its walls lined with holographic displays showing the histories and achievements of the council's member species. Marcus paused briefly at the human display, still feeling a surge of pride at seeing Earth's blue marble spinning. Alongside the homeworlds of civilizations that had achieved spaceflight when humanity's ancestors were still learning to use fire, Ambassador Chen, a melodious voice called out, causing him to turn. The being approaching him moved with a fluid grace that seemed to defy the station's artificial gravity. She was Sylathi, her people one of the council's founding species, and her appearance was breathtaking even by their standards. Her skin had an opalescent quality that shifted between pale blue and silver, depending on the angle of the light. Long, flowing hair that seemed to move with a life of its own, framed, delicate. Features dominated by eyes that held the depth of nebulous whirling with colors Marcus had no names for. She wore the traditional diplomatic robes of her people, which seemed to be woven from starlight itself. "Princess Lirale," Marcus said, offering the formal Sylathi greeting gesture he'd practiced countless times, a slight bow with his right hand placed over his heart. Fingers spread in a pattern that represented the 5 fundamental forces there. Culture revered. "I'm honored by your presence." Those impossible eyes widened slightly, and he felt more than saw her surprise. "You know our customs," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made it sound like a chord rather than a single. "Note, most newcomers to the council simply offer their own species greetings and expect others to adapt. Humanity has much to learn from the established members of the council," Marcus replied diplomatically. "It seemed only proper to show respect for those who came before us." A smile graced her features, different from a human smile but unmistakably warm. "Walk with me, Ambassador. The council session doesn't begin for another half hour, and I find myself curious about humanity's newest representative." They fell into step together, and Marcus couldn't help but notice how her movement seemed to flow rather than walk, as if she were dancing to music only she could hear. Through the transparent walls of the corridor, the vast expanse of space stretched endlessly, populated by ships from a dozen different worlds going about their business. "You're younger than your predecessors," Lirale observed, her tone curious rather than critical. Ambassador Martinez was impressive in her own way, but she approached every interaction like a military engagement. Marcus chuckled, careful. To keep his teeth covered? Linda's a former admiral. Old habits die hard. The council felt it was time for a different approach, someone who could build bridges rather than fortifications. And they chose you. It wasn't a question. Her eyes studied him with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. "I've read your file, of course. You work in the outer colonies, mediating between the mining consortiums and the indigenous settlers. Impressive. For someone so young, had good teachers," Marcus said modestly, "and I believe in finding common ground. There's always something that connects us, no matter how different we might appear." Lirale stopped walking, turning to face him fully. Even between humans and Sylathi, your species thrives on conflict and competition. Mine values harmony and consensus above all else. Your people explore space as conquerors. We explore it as pilgrims. Where's the common ground there? The challenge in her voice was unmistakable, but Marcus sensed it came from genuine curiosity. Rather than hostility, he took a moment to consider his response, aware that this informal encounter might shape humanity's relationship with one of the Council's most influential members. We both look at the stars and see possibility, he said finally. The methods might differ, but the dream is the same, to understand our place in the universe, to grow beyond what we are. Competition and harmony aren't opposites. They're different instruments in the same orchestra. Something shifted in her expression, and the swirling colors in her eyes seemed to quicken their dance. It's an interesting perspective. Tell me, Ambassador Chen, do you play any instruments? The apparent non sequitur caught him off guard. Yes, actually, piano, though it's been months since I've had the chance to practice. The Sylathi believe that music is the fundamental language of the universe, Lirele said, resuming their walk. Every species has its own interpretation, but the underlying principles remain constant. Perhaps, would you be interested in attending a concert? My people are performing tomorrow evening in the cultural district. It might provide insight into our perspective that no amount of diplomatic briefings could convey. Marcus felt his pulse quicken slightly. This was an unexpected opportunity. Lanny cultural events were typically closed to outsiders, especially newcomers to the station. I would be honored, Princess. Should I prepare in any particular way? Just bring an open mind, she said, that not quite human smile returning. And perhaps afterward you could show me what human music sounds like. I confess I've been curious ever since I learned your species creates music from conflict. You call tension and resolution. Before Marcus could respond, a soft chime echoed through the corridor. The council session, Lirele said, inclining her head. Till tomorrow then, Ambassador. I look forward to seeing whether humans and Sylathi can find ... harmony. She glided away, leaving Marcus to process what had just happened. He'd been on the station less than 3 hours, and had somehow secured a private invitation from one of the most reclusive species in the council. More than that, he found himself genuinely looking forward to the evening, and not just for the diplomatic advantages it might bring. The council chamber itself was a marvel of engineering and compromise. The vast spherical room had no true floor or ceiling. Instead, each delegation's platform floated at their preferred orientation, creating a three-dimensional forum where no species held a position of superiority. Marcus took his place at the UC platform designated for humanity, activating the holographic interfaces that would allow him to follow the proceedings in real-time translation.
Esteemed colleagues, the current council moderator, a crystalline being from the Shard Collective,
began their voice resonating through the chamber like struck glass. We convene today to address the Korthax Empire's proposed expansion into the neutral zone, and to formally recognize Earth's new ambassador to this body. Marcus stood as attention turned to him, drawing on years of experience to project calm confidence despite the weight of dozens of alien gazes. Members of the Galactic Council, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems.
Humanity is honored to continue our participation in this august body.
We come not as supplicants or conquerors, but as partners, ready to contribute to our shared prosperity. He paused, letting his words settle before continuing. I know there are concerns about humanity's rapid expansion, about our reputation for aggression. I won't stand here and claim we're perfect. But I will say this, our greatest strength has always been our ability to adapt, to learn, to find common cause with those unlike ourselves. We see in this council not a restraint on our ambitions, but an opportunity to channel them towards something greater than any one species could achieve alone. The chamber remained silent for a moment, processing his words. Then from her platform among the Sylathi delegation, Marcus caught Lirele's subtle nod of approval. Other responses varied. The insectoid hegemony clicked their mandibles in what his training identified as cautious interest, while the Korthax delegation's predatory features remained impassive. Pretty words, growled Korthax Alpha, the Empire's primary representative. The massive lupin alien's voice carried the edge of barely restrained violence that made their species infamous. but words are vapor. What does humanity offer beyond rhetoric? Marcus had expected this challenge. The Korthax respected only strength, though they'd learned through painful experience that strength came in many forms. "We offer perspective," he replied calmly. "Humanity is young by galactic standards, but that youth brings fresh eyes to old problems. We've already submitted a proposal for mediating the neutral zone dispute, one that acknowledges both Korthawk's territorial imperatives and the Council's stability concerns." He gestured, and a holographic display materialized above the chamber center, showing a complex three-dimensional map. The zone contains 17 systems of strategic value. Our proposal would grant the Korthax Empire development rights to 7 of these systems in exchange for accepting Council monitoring stations and 3 others. The remaining 7 would be jointly administered, with profits from resource extraction shared according to a formula that accounts for both investment and security provision. The Korthax Alpha leaned forward, interested despite himself. "Why would the Empire accept Council interference in our sovereign expansion?" "Because the alternative is conflict," Marcus said simply. "Not with humanity. We're too new to pose a threat to the Empire." The Sylathi Harmony and the Shard Collective have already indicated they view unilateral expansion as a treaty violation. War serves no one's interests. This compromise allows the Empire to grow while maintaining the balance that has kept the peace for 3 centuries. A ripple of discussion passed through the chamber, the blunt acknowledgement of realpolitik over. Diplomatic niceties was unexpectedly refreshing from a newcomer. Even the traditionally neutral observers, beings of pure energy who rarely involved themselves in material concerns, flickered with what might have been interest. The session continued for another 3 hours, covering everything from trade route allocations to the standardization of temporal measurements across species with different perceptions of time. Marcus contributed where appropriate, always careful to position humanity as eager to help rather than demanding special consideration. By the time the moderator called for recess, he'd managed to avoid any major diplomatic incidents and had even garnered what seemed like approval from several delegations as the platforms began to disperse, allowing delegates to mingle in the chamber's common areas. Marcus found himself approached by an unusual pairing, a hegemony drone and one of the enigmatic void touched. "Ambassador Chen," the drone clicked, its translator rendering the sounds into oddly accented English. "This one is designated Zek 9, trade liaison for the Third Hive. Your proposal shows unusual understanding of resource allocation dynamics." The void touched, whose form seemed to exist partially outside normal spacetime, added in a voice like distant whispers, "The human perspective on temporality intrigues us. Your species perceives time as linear yet acts as if it were fluid, a paradox worth exploring." Marcus engaged both beings in conversation, part of his mind marveling at the surreal nature of his new position, while another part worked to identify potential opportunities for humanity in these interactions. It was exhausting work, requiring constant vigilance to avoid cultural missteps while projecting an image of competent confidence. He was deep in discussion with Zek 9 about potential agricultural exchanges when he noticed Lirale moving through the crowd, other delegates parting before her like water. The Sylathi commanded respect not through force or wealth, but through something more subtle. Their species had been traveling the stars for millennia before most others achieved sapience, and that deep history carried weight. Their eyes met across the chamber, and she offered a gesture he didn't recognize, a slight tilt of her head combined with a hand movement that seemed to trace a pattern in the air. Before he could puzzle out its meaning, a priority alert chimed on his personal communicator. "Ambassador." Janet's voice carried an edge of urgency. "We've just received word from Earth. The colony ship Esperanza has gone missing near the neutral zone. 3,000 colonists, including the Deputy Agriculture Minister's daughter." Marcus kept his expression neutral despite the spike of concern. A missing colony ship was bad enough, but in the disputed zone, the timing couldn't be worse. "Understood," he subvocalized through the comm implant. "Prepare a full briefing. I'll be back at the embassy within the hour." He concluded his conversations with practiced diplomatic grace, mind already racing through the implications. The Esperanza was one of humanity's newest colony ships, equipped with the latest technology. For it to simply vanish suggested either catastrophic failure or external intervention. Either possibility could derail humanity's careful attempts to establish themselves as reliable members of the galactic community as he made his way toward the exit. Lirelei intercepted him. "Troubling news?" she asked, those swirling eyes reading more from his expression than he'd intended to reveal. "A developing situation," Marcus admitted, seeing no point in dissembling. Word would spread through the station soon enough. "One of our colony ships has lost contact near the neutral zone." Her expression grew somber. "The zone has become increasingly unstable. Korthax patrols, pirate activity, and worse. If you need assistance—" "Thank you," Marcus said, genuinely touched by the offer. "But humanity needs to handle this ourselves. We can't always rely on others to solve our problems." "Pride?" she asked. "Necessity," he corrected. "If we're to be treated as equals, we need to act like it, though I may take you up on that offer of information. Your people's knowledge of the zone could prove invaluable." Lirelei studied him for a long moment. "You're not what I expected from a human diplomat, Marcus Chen. Until tomorrow evening, then, may you find what you seek." She departed, leaving Marcus to hurry back to the human embassy. The corridors seemed longer on the return journey, his mind occupied with the growing crisis. 3,000 lives hung in the balance, along with humanity's reputation. If the Esperanza had been attacked, it could provide ammunition for those who claimed humans attracted trouble. If it was a technical failure, it would reinforce perceptions of humanity as recklessly ambitious. The embassy occupied a modest section of the station's diplomatic quarter, its design a careful balance between human aesthetics and galactic standard functionality. Marcus barely noticed the familiar surroundings as he strode into the situation room, where his staff had already assembled. "Talk to me," he ordered, dropping into his chair as holographic displays flickered to life around him. Janet pulled up a star chart, highlighting the Esperanza's last known position. The ship departed from Sigma Station 8 days ago. Bound for the colony world we've designated New Vale. Last contact was during a routine check-in here. She indicated a point. Barely inside the neutral zone. Everything seemed normal. Then ... nothing. Emergency beacon? Negative. Either it wasn't activated, or something's blocking the signal. Marcus studied the data, looking for patterns. What about other traffic in the area? That's where it gets. Interesting, Lieutenant Commander Torres, the embassy's military attaché, interjected. Shard Collective monitoring stations detected an unusual energy signature in the vicinity approximately 2 hours after we lost contact. It doesn't match any known weapon signatures, but it doesn't match anything else either, Marcus. Finished, pirates wouldn't have that kind of technology. Which leaves. The Korthax have been increasing patrols in that sector, Torres said grimly, claiming anti-piracy operations, but everyone knows they're testing boundaries. Marcus felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders. His response here would set the tone for humanity's approach to crisis management in the galactic community. Act too aggressively, and they'd confirm every negative stereotype about human belligerence. Act too passively, and they'd be seen as weak, inviting further provocations. Options, he asked. The Navy has 2 frigates within response range, Torres reported. The Defiant and the Resilience. They could be on site within 18 hours. Sending warships into the neutral zone would be seen as escalation, Janet warned. The Council just spent 3 hours discussing that exact issue. Marcus rose, pacing to the viewport that looked out over the station's glittering expanse. Somewhere out there, 3,000 humans were either dead or in desperate need of help. But the wrong move could spark an incident that would cost far more lives. Need more information before we act, he decided. Janet, reach out to our contacts in the trading guilds. Someone must have seen something. Torres, have the Defiant and Resilience move to the edge of the zone, but hold position. Make it clear they're on a rescue mission, not a military operation. The Council? Janet asked. I'll inform them personally. Transparency might buy us some goodwill. He paused, remembering Lirelei's offer. and I'll make some informal inquiries. The Sylathi sensor networks are the best in known space. If anyone detected what really happened, it would be them. His staff dispersed to their tasks, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the human drama playing out in their midst. He'd trained for moments like this, run countless scenarios in preparation for his posting, but reality had a weight that no simulation could capture. His communicator chimed softly. A message from Lirile. The Harmony's sensors detected something as well. Tomorrow's concert begins at 7th cycle. Perhaps arrive early for a private viewing of our observatory, Marcus read between the lines. The princess was offering him unofficial access to Sylathi intelligence data. Remarkable gesture of trust for a species known for their insularity. It seemed his instinct to approach the council with respect rather than demands was already paying dividends. He sent back a simple acknowledgement and returned to the crisis at hand. The next few hours would be crucial. How humanity handled this challenge would echo through the diplomatic corridors for years to come. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice noted that he was looking forward to tomorrow evening for reasons that had nothing to do with censored data or missing ships. The embassy's lights dimmed automatically as the station moved into its artificial night cycle, but Marcus continued working, coordinating with Earth, managing the information flow, and preparing for the inevitable moment when the Esperanza's fate became public knowledge. Through it all, he held on to the hope that 3,000 souls were still out there, waiting for rescue. As the first cycle of his first crisis as ambassador drew to a close, Marcus allowed himself a moment of reflection. He'd come to the station, expecting politics and protocol, trade negotiations and cultural exchanges. Instead, he found himself balancing on the knife's edge between peace and conflict. With lives hanging in the balance and unexpected allies emerging from unlikely quarters, the stars outside offered no answers. But Marcus had learned long ago that answers came from within, from the connections forged between beings who chose to reach across the vast darkness of space to touch another mind, another heart. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new opportunities. And perhaps, if he was very careful and very lucky, both the missing colonists and humanity's place in the galactic community could still be saved. The night stretched on, full of uncertain promise and the weight of responsibility. But for the first time since arriving at the station, Marcus felt he might truly belong here, it among the stars and the strange beings who called them home. The real work was just beginning. The Sylathi cultural complex existed in its own section of the station, a breathtaking fusion of advanced technology and artistic expression that seemed to blur the line between architecture and sculpture. Marcus arrived 30 minutes before the concert's scheduled start, following Lirile's subtle invitation. The corridors here curved in ways that defied conventional geometry, creating optical illusions that made distance and direction fluid concepts. Ambassador Chen, a melodious voice greeted him. A Sylathi attendant, their features bearing the same ethereal quality as Lirile, though less pronounced, gestured toward a shimmering doorway. The princess awaits you in the observatory. Please follow me. Marcus had spent the previous 18 hours managing the growing crisis. The Esperanza remained missing, but discreet inquiries through back channels had yielded troubling information. Multiple independent traders reported unusual energy readings in the neutral zone, patterns that didn't match any known technology. More concerning were the whispered rumors of ships entering the zone and emerging, ... changed. The observatory took his breath away. Unlike human observatories with their mechanical telescopes and digital displays, this was a living representation of space itself. The walls, floor, and ceiling had vanished, replaced by a three-dimensional projection so realistic that Marcus felt momentarily vertigo, as if he were floating in the void itself. Stars wheeled around them in their eternal dance. Nebulae bloomed and faded in accelerated time. The cosmic web of dark matter became visible as ghostly filaments connecting everything. Lirile stood at the center of this cosmic display, hands moving through the air as she manipulated the view with gestures that seemed more like dance than interface control. She wore a different gown today, one seeming to capture and reflect the starlight around her, making her appear as if she were clothed in the universe itself. Magnificent, isn't it? She said without turning. Your species relies on instruments. To perceive the universe, we've learned to feel it directly, to sense the subtle harmonies that connect all things. It's beyond words, Marcus admitted, moving carefully through the space. Half convinced he might step off the edge of reality, though I suspect you didn't invite me early just to show off your superior technology. She turned then, a smile playing at her lips. Direct, very human. With a gesture, the cosmic display focused on a specific region of space, the neutral zone. What do you know of the Wanderer?
Marcus
Frowned. That's a legend, isn't it? A ghost ship that appears throughout the galaxy, stealing vessels and leaving no trace? Legends often have roots in truth. Liralay's expression grew serious. For the past 3 centuries, ships have vanished in patterns that suggest intelligence rather than random piracy. Always in disputed zones, always vessels. Carrying something unique, new technology, rare genetic samples, cultural artifacts, the display shifted, showing dozens of incidents mapped across time and space. Marcus's diplomatic training kicked in as he recognized the implications. You think the Wanderer took the Esperanza? But why? It's a colony ship, nothing special about it except it carries 3,000 humans, Liralay finished. Your species is still new to the galactic community. Your genetic diversity, your unique approach to problem solving, your unpredictability, all valuable to the right collector. The word sent a chill down Marcus's spine. Collector? We don't know who or what controls the Wanderer. But the pattern. It's clear. It takes what is rare, what is unique. She moved closer and Marcus caught a scent like ozone and flowers, alien but not unpleasant. The Harmony has been tracking these disappearances for decades. We've never shared this information. BECAUSE? Because it would cause panic, Marcus finished. And because no one has ever recovered a taken vessel, till possibly now. Liralay gestured again, and the display zoomed in on a section of space that seemed empty until she enhanced it. There, barely visible, was an energy signature unlike anything Marcus had seen. 3 hours ago, our deep space sensors detected this. It matches theoretical models of what the Wanderer's drive signature might look like, based on residual traces left at disappearance sites. Marcus studied the data, his mind racing. It's moving away from the last known position of the Esperanza. If we could track it, ... dangerous thinking, Ambassador. No one who has pursued the Wanderer has ever returned. Right. Her hand touched his arm. Lightly, and he felt an unexpected tingle at the contact. But I know your species well enough to know that won't stop you from trying. 3,000 lives, Marcus said simply. I can't just write them off, which is why I'm sharing this with you. She waved her hand, and a data crystal materialized in her palm. Everything the Harmony knows about the Wanderer, use it wisely. And Marcus, the use of his first name wasn't lost on him. Be careful. The universe would be diminished by your loss. Before he could respond, soft chimes indicated the concert was about to begin. Liralay's expression shifted, becoming lighter. But for now, let us set aside these heavy matters. You came to experience Zealand culture. Allow me to show you how we perceive the universe's song. The observatory transformed around them, the cosmic display fading as they were gently lowered through the floor into the concert hall proper. The space was unlike any performance venue Marcus had experienced. There was no clear division between performers and audience. Instead, beings were arranged in complex patterns that seemed to follow some esoteric mathematical principle. Sylathi concerts are participatory, Liralay explained, as she guided him to a position near the center. We don't simply listen to music, we become part of it. Your translator will help, but try to feel beyond the mere sounds. The lights dimmed, and the performance began. At first, Marcus heard only what seemed like random tones, discordant and without pattern. But gradually, as more Sylathi joined in, he began to perceive the underlying structure. It wasn't music as humans understood it, but something more fundamental, a harmonic representation of mathematical principles, of the forces that governed reality itself. His translator struggled to convey the full experience, offering approximations that fell far short of the reality. But something else was happening. As he stood there, surrounded by the alien harmonies, Marcus began to feel the music directly. It was as if dormant synapses in his brain were firing for the first time, revealing patterns and connections he'd never imagined. Beside him, Lyralay's voice joined the collective, adding a melodic line that seemed to spiral through the composition. Without thinking, Marcus found himself humming a simple human melody that should have clashed with the alien harmonics, but instead wove through them. Adding a new dimension to the sound, the Sylathi nearest to them turned in surprise, but didn't stop singing. Instead, they adjusted their tones to incorporate his contribution, and suddenly, Marcus was part of the performance. His human perspective, adding something unique to the collective expression. Time lost meaning. The concert could have lasted minutes or hours. Marcus couldn't tell. He was lost in the experience of truly universal communication, where species barriers dissolved in the face of pure mathematical harmony. When it finally ended, he found himself breathless, exhilarated, and somehow changed. Remarkable, Lyralay breathed, her eyes shining with an emotion he couldn't interpret. In 300 years of performing the cosmic harmony, no non-Sylathi has ever successfully integrated with the pattern. You didn't just hear our music, Marcus, you understood it. The other Sylathi were dispersing, but many cast curious glances. Their way, Marcus noticed several seemed to be harmonizing under their breath, recreating portions of the section where his voice had joined theirs. I don't understand what just happened, he admitted. Nor do I, entirely. She led him from the concert hall through corridors that seemed more welcoming than before, as if the station itself had accepted him. But I believe it's time I showed you something even more private. You trusted me with your ship's disappearance. Let me trust you with a secret of my own. They took a transport pod to a section of the station Marcus hadn't known existed. Architecture here was older, predating the current council structure. Lyralay led him to an observation deck that looked out over a docking bay containing a single ship unlike anything in the known galaxy. The vessel was beautiful and terrible in equal measure. Its hull seemed to be made of the same opalescent material. As Sylathi's skin, shifting and changing as he watched, the design violated every principle of spacecraft engineering he knew, yet something about it whispered of incredible speed and maneuverability. This is the Harmony's dream, Lyralay said softly. My personal ship built using technologies my people have kept hidden for millennia. It's the only vessel we know of that has encountered the Wanderer and survived. Marcus turned to her in shock. You've seen it. It's once, a century ago, when I was barely more than a child by my people's standards. Her expression grew distant. I was on a cultural mission to the outer reach when the Wanderer appeared. It was vast beyond description, a ship that seemed to exist partially outside normal space. It scanned us, and I felt its intelligence probing, evaluating. Then it simply left, as if we weren't what it was looking for. Why didn't you report this? To what end? We had no proof, no data our instruments could capture. The Wanderer exists as much in thought as in reality. But the Harmony's dream remembers. Her consciousness touched it briefly. At Marcus's confused look, she smiled. Our ships are living beings, Ambassador. Partners rather than tools. And she believes she could find the Wanderer again if given the proper motivation. The implications hung between them like a charged field. Marcus knew what she was offering. Not just information, but active assistance. The kind that could spark a diplomatic incident if discovered. The Sylathi were notoriously neutral, avoiding direct involvement in other species conflicts. Why would you risk this? He asked. Lyralay was quiet for a long moment, gazing at her ship. Do you know why I attended the council session yesterday? It wasn't required. I hold no official position beyond cultural liaison. I came because I was curious about humanity's new representative. Your species fascinates us, Marcus. You're so young, so chaotic, yet you've achieved in decades what took others centuries. You burn bright and fast, like supernovas. She turned to face him, and her eyes held depths he was only beginning to understand. When you joined our harmony tonight, when your human chaos merged with our order to create something new, I've never experienced anything like it. The universe is vast and often cold, but occasionally it brings together beings who can create warmth even in the void. Marcus felt his heart rate accelerate. The attraction he'd been trying to ignore, dismissing as irrelevant to his diplomatic duties, suddenly demanded acknowledgement. Lyra lay, ... I know, she said softly. It's impossible. Our species are too different, our responsibilities too great. But impossible things happen every day in this universe. Your missing ship, for instance, impossible to find, yet here we stand discussing exactly that. A soft alarm chimed on Marcus's communicator, breaking the moment. He checked it with a mixture of relief and disappointment. The Defiant has reached the edge of the neutral zone. They're requesting instructions. And what will you tell them? Marcus looked at the alien princess who'd offered him more in 2 days than most diplomats achieved in years of careful negotiation. Then at her impossible ship that might be humanity's only hope of recovering the Esperanza. The logical choice was to report everything to his superiors, to go through proper channels, to minimize risk. But logic had never been humanity's strongest trait. I'm going to tell them to hold position and maintain communication silence, he said. And then I'm going to ask if you know how to pilot that ship with a passenger aboard. Lyralay's smile was radiant. She sings better with harmony than alone. But Marcus, if we do this, there can be no official record. No protection from either of our governments. We would be taking an enormous risk. 3,000 human lives. A chance to solve a 3-century mystery, and ... He paused, then decided on honesty, an opportunity to see if what happened in that concert hall was a fluke or something more. You realize if we're discovered it could destroy your career? Set back humans-Alani relations by decades? I've never let the possible consequences of failure stop me from doing what's right. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. We'll need supplies for an extended journey. The Wanderer's last estimated position puts it near the void reaches. Empty space between galactic arms where reality itself grows thin, and Marcus. We should discuss what might happen if we succeed. The Wanderer doesn't give up its prizes easily. Spent the next hours in careful preparation. Marcus crafted messages that would buy them time, reports of following up on promising leads, requests for the Navy ships to remain on standby. He knew Janet would see through the deception quickly, but hopefully not before they were beyond recall range. Lyralay handled her own preparations with practiced efficiency, loading supplies onto the Harmony's Dream while communing with the ship, in harmonics that Marcus's translator couldn't parse. He understood enough to know the ship was eager. It had been too long since it had faced a true challenge, as they prepared to depart. Marcus took one last look at the council station. He'd been there less than 50 hours, but it felt like a lifetime. When he returned, everything would be different. Second thoughts? Lyralay asked, now dressed in a form-fitting pilot suit that seemed to be a living part of the ship itself. Third and fourth thoughts? Marcus admitted. No, but I'm still going. Good. Certainty is overrated. She gestured to the ship's boarding ramp. Welcome aboard the Harmony's Dream, Ambassador Chen. Let's go find your missing people and perhaps discover what songs the universe sings in the spaces between stars. The ship's interior was as alien as its exterior. All flowing curves and surfaces that responded to touch with color and warmth. There were no visible controls, no screens or interfaces he recognized. Instead, Lyralay stood in a circular depression. At the center, her hands moving through the air as she communed with the vessel. Place your hand here, she instructed, indicating a section of the wall that pulsed with soft light. The dream needs to know you, to understand your harmonic signature. If we're to work together? Marcus pressed his palm against the warm surface, and immediately felt a presence touch his mind. It was gentler than he expected, curious rather than invasive. Images flashed through his consciousness: surfs, blue oceans, humanity's first steps into space, his own memories of childhood and ambition. In return, he sensed vast age, journeys between stars he couldn't name, and an excitement that matched his own. "She likes you," Lirelei said with surprise. "That's unusual. It took her years to fully accept me." The ship lifted off with no sensation of movement. One moment they were in the docking bay, the next they were sliding through space with impossible grace. The council station fell away behind them, and ahead lay only stars and the unknown. "The neutral zone boundary in 10 minutes at this speed," Marcus reported, checking his personal scanner. "After that, we're in disputed space." "The Wanderer cares nothing for political boundaries," Lirelei replied, her attention focused on piloting. "But others might. The Dream can hide us from most sensors, but we're not invisible. If the Korthax are actively patrolling, we'll deal with that if it happens." Marcus moved to stand beside her, watching her guide the ship with movements that looked more like conducting a symphony than piloting. "Can you teach me to help? If we run into trouble, 2 pilots might be better than 1? She glanced at him, those swirling eyes unreadable. "It took me 50 years to learn to merge with the Dream. But then again, you did harmonize with an entire concert hall on your first attempt. Put your hands over mine." He did as instructed, standing close enough that he could feel her warmth. Smell that alien flower scent. Their hands touched, and suddenly he could feel the ship through her, a second-hand sensation that was overwhelming and exhilarating. "Feel the stellar winds," she murmured. "Every star sings its own song, creates its own currents in space-time. The Dream rides these currents like your Earth dolphins ride ocean waves." For a moment, Marcus struggled, his human mind trying to process sensations it wasn't equipped to understand. Then he remembered the concert, how he'd stopped trying to comprehend and simply let himself experience. The change was immediate.
Ow.
Lirelei's touch, he felt the ship respond, their combined consciousness, guiding it with increasing confidence. By the first song, Lirelei breathed, "You're actually doing it. No human, no non-Zelani has ever." A harsh alarm cut through the moment. Marcus's eyes snapped open to see proximity warnings flashing 3 Korthax interceptors, closing fast. "Tosal vessels detected." A growling voice came over the communications channel. "You are in violation of Neutral Zone Treaty Article 7. Prepare to be boarded." Marcus felt Lirelei tense. The Korthax wouldn't accept their mission as legitimate. Being caught would create exactly the kind of incident he'd been trying to avoid. But before he could suggest options, he'd felt something else through their connection. The Harmony's Dream itself, offering possibilities. "Trust the ship," Lirelei whispered. "Trust me." The Korthax vessels closed in, weapons charging. Die. Last possible moment, Lirelei's hands danced through a complex pattern, and reality twisted. The Harmony's Dream didn't accelerate in any conventional sense, it simply slipped between the layers of normal space. Leaving the interceptors firing at shadows, Marcus gasped as they emerged in a different region entirely. Stars he didn't recognize wheeling overhead. What was that? "Something we don't share with the Council," Lirelei said, sagging slightly with exhaustion. "The Dream can navigate spaces between spaces, fold reality in ways your physics says is impossible. But it takes a toll." He steadied her, concerned. By how drained she looked. "Are you all right?" "I will be." "But Marcus, we need to discuss something." She straightened, meeting his eyes. "The deeper we go into the void reaches, the more the ship will demand. The Dream bonds with its pilots, and right now, it's trying to bond with both of us. If we continue, that connection will deepen, might emerge from this changed, linked in ways neither of us fully understands." Marcus thought of the 3,000 colonists, of the responsibilities waiting back at the station, of all the logical reasons to turn back. Then he looked at the remarkable being beside him, felt the living ship humming around them, sensed the vast mysteries waiting in the darkness. Ahead? "I've been changed since the moment I walked into that council chamber and met you," he said honestly. "Whatever happens next, I won't regret it."
Ow.
Something shifted in her expression, a vulnerability breaking through her composed exterior. "Humans," she said softly. "You leap into the void with such faith that you'll find something on the other side. Sometimes we even do," Marcus replied. "Now, show me how to read these sensor patterns. If we're going to find the Wanderer, we'll need to work together." They bent over the ship's consciousness together, two minds from different worlds, learning to think as one. Outside, the stars grew sparse as they entered the void reaches, an empty space between galactic arms where few dared to travel. Somewhere, in that darkness, the Wanderer waited with its stolen prizes, and in the living heart of the Harmony's dream, the souls began a dance that would change the course of both their species' histories. The impossible was becoming possible, one harmonized note at a time. The void reaches tested the limits of sanity. Here, in the vast emptiness between galactic arms, space itself seemed thinner, as if reality was merely a suggestion rather than a law. The Harmony's dream sang a low, mournful tune as it navigated currents that no human instrument could detect. Guided by senses that evolved before Earth's sun was born, Marcus had lost track of time. Hours? Days? In this place where stars were distant memories and darkness pressed against the ship like a living thing, conventional measurements meant nothing. He and Lirelei had fallen into a rhythm, their consciousness intertwining through the ship's neural network until he couldn't always tell where his thoughts ended and hers began. There, Lirelei whispered, her voice hoarse from maintaining their connection. "Do you feel it?" Marcus closed his eyes, extending his awareness through the dream's senses. At first, nothing, then a wrongness in the fabric of space itself, like a discordant note in an otherwise perfect symphony. "It's huge. The Wanderer doesn't exist entirely in our dimensional framework," Lirelei explained, her hands never ceasing their dance over the ship's interface. "What we're sensing is merely its shadow in three-dimensional space." Through their link, Marcus felt her exhaustion. They'd been searching for days, following traces so faint that only the dream's extraordinary senses could detect them. The ship itself was growing restless, its consciousness brushing against theirs with increasing urgency. "She wants to go home," Marcus observed. "She's afraid," Lirelei corrected. "The dream remembers her last encounter with the Wanderer. But she's braver than I am. You're here, aren't you?" She turned to him, and he was struck again by her alien beauty. The way her opalescent skin seemed to capture what little light existed in this void. How her eyes held depths that made the surrounding darkness seem shallow. "I'm here because of you. Because when you sang with us, when our harmonies merged, I felt something I've never experienced in 3 centuries of life." "No, let me finish." She stepped away from the control interface, the ship maintaining their course automatically. "My people value harmony above all else. We spend our lives seeking perfect resonance, perfect order, but you brought chaos into our song, and instead of destroying it, you made it beautiful. You made me realize that perfection isn't always about order. Sometimes it's about finding someone whose chaos complements your harmony." Marcus reached for her, and she came into his arms as if she belonged there.
"You're the wrongness of it, human."
And Sylathi, ambassador and princess, order and chaos only, made it feel more right. When their lips met, he tasted starlight and possibility, felt her consciousness bloom against his in ways that their neural link had only hinted at. The ship shuddered around them, not in distress, but in something like joy. Through their connection, Marcus felt the dream's approval, or delighted her pilots finding their own harmony. Then reality crashed. Back as proximity alarms screamed, the Wanderer materialized out of nothingness like a nightmare-given form. Lirelei had called it vast, but the word failed utterly to convey the reality. It was a city in space, a moon-sized construct that hurt to look at directly. Its geometry defied understandings, surfaces that folded in on themselves, angles that existed in more than 3 dimensions. A hull that seemed to be made of crystallized space-time itself. By all the songs ever sung, Lirelei breathed, her face pale with awe and terror. Marcus forced himself to focus on their mission. "Can you detect the Esperanza?" She returned to the controls, her movements sharp with renewed purpose. "The dream is trying, but the Wanderer's presence is overwhelming our senses. It's like trying to hear a whisper while standing next to a supernova." Massive ship, if it could even be called, that began to move, not with engines or thrusters, but by warping space around itself, creating a gravity well that drew the Harmony's dream inexorably closer. It's pulling us in, Marcus stated the obvious, his hands joining Liralay's on the controls as they fought to maintain position. No, she said, understanding flooding through their link. It's inviting us. The Wanderer doesn't capture by force it, offers something irresistible, and waits for curiosity to do the rest. As if responding to her words, the space before them shimmered. Images formed in the darkness, visions of worlds beyond imagination. Technologies that could reshape reality, knowledge accumulated over eons. Marcus felt the pull not just physically but mentally, a siren song promising answers to questions he'd never thought to ask. Don't look directly at it, Liralay warned. But her own voice carried a dreamy quality that suggested she was struggling with the same temptation. Through supreme effort, Marcus tore his attention away from the visions. If it operates on curiosity, an invitation, then maybe we can use that. Can the dream communicate with it? Communicate. Liralay's laugh had an edge of hysteria. You want to talk to a legend? Want to negotiate with a collector, Marcus corrected. Think about it, the Wanderer takes what's unique, what's rare. It's not destroying these ships. It's preserving them. That suggests intelligence, purpose, and anything with purpose can be bargained with. She stared at him, then shook her head with something like wonder. Only a human would face an entity older than civilizations and think, let's make a bay. Deal. Do you have a better idea? Instead of answering, she began harmonizing, not with the ship this time, but projecting outward. Marcus felt her consciousness expand, carrying his along with it, reaching toward the impossible geometries of the Wanderer. For a moment, nothing, then dash contact. The presence that touched their minds was vast beyond comprehension. Not malevolent, but so utterly alien that Marcus's human consciousness recoiled. Only Liralay's steadying influence kept him from retreating entirely. Curious. The Wanderer spoke without words, its thoughts resonating through dimensions Marcus couldn't perceive. A harmony of chaos and order, unique, valuable. Images flooded their shared consciousness, the Wanderer's collection, preserved in temporal stasis. Ships from 1,000 species, each representing some pinnacle of achievement or evolutionary quirk. And there, among them, the Esperanza, its 3,000 souls locked in a moment between heartbeats. You seek the new singers, the Wanderer observed. They sing of earth and sky, of growth from destruction. Unique patterns, worth preserving, worth returning, Marcus projected, finding his mental voice. Humanity offers more than just our diversity. We offer perspective, the ability to find harmony in chaos, to build bridges between incompatible systems, but only if we're free to grow, to interact with others. Freedom diminishes, entropy increases. Preservation protects against the dark. Through their connection, Liralay shared her understanding. The Wanderer was older than any current civilization. It had seen the rise and fall of countless species, watched entropy claim entire galaxies. Its collecting wasn't malicious, but a desperate attempt to save something from the inevitable. Heat, death of the universe. But you're preserving death, not life, Marcus argued. Those people on the Esperanza, they're not living their exhibits. True preservation means allowing growth, change, evolution. Change leads to ending. Have seen too many endings, Liralay added, her mental voice harmonizing with Marcus's. Show it, Marcus. Show it what we've begun. Understanding her meaning, Marcus opened his consciousness fully, sharing their story. A human and a Sylathi, species separated by biology and philosophy, finding harmony through their differences. The way their chaos and order created something new, something neither could achieve alone. The possibility of futures that neither species could imagine separately. The Wanderer's attention focused with crushing intensity. Through their link, Marcus felt it examining not just their memories, but their potential future's children, who would bridge species. Technologies that merged human adaptability with Sylathi sophistication. Songs that no single throat could sing. Interesting. It finally concluded. You offer preservation through combination rather than isolation. A different paradigm. Life preserves itself, Marcus said. It adapts, evolves, finds new ways to survive. Your collection is a museum. We're offering a garden. Silence stretched between dimensions. Then the wanderer moved not physically, but conceptually. Space twisted, and suddenly the Esperanza floated free, its hull intact, its lights beginning to flicker as temporal stasis released its grip. In exchange, the wanderer proposed. The new singers for a promise. You will create new combinations, new harmonies. You will prove that preservation through growth exceeds preservation through stasis. In one revolution of your galaxy, I will return. Show me a garden, or I reclaim. Not just the ship, but all it has touched. Marcus felt Lyralay's spike of alarm through their link. But he kept his mental voice steady. Agreed. One galactic year to show you that diversity and cooperation creates stronger preservation than any collection. Witnessed and bound, the presence withdrew, taking with it the crushing weight of eons. The wanderer began to fade, its impossible geometries folding in on themselves until only empty space remained. The Esperanza drifted where it had been. Emergency. Beacons beginning to flash as its systems came back online. Marcus, Lyralay said, her voice shaking. Do you realize what you just promised? A galactic year that's barely any time at all to revolutionize interspecies cooperation. Then we'd better get started. He was already activating emergency communications, sending signals to the defiant and resilience. Besides, we've already begun. You and I are proof it's possible. She looked at him with an expression that mingled admiration and exasperation. You impossible human. You just negotiated with an entity older than stars and committed to species to an impossible task. 3 species, Marcus corrected. The dream was part of our harmony. She counts 2. The ship pulsed with warm approval at his words, and Lyralay's expression softened. How very human of you to make a family out of chaos, order, and living technology. The next hours blurred together in a symphony of activity. The Navy frigates arrived to find the Esperanza intact but traumatized, its colonists struggling to process their experience in the Wanderer's collection. Marcus coordinated the rescue efforts while maintaining the fiction that he'd been working from the embassy the entire time. Ambassador Captain Morrison of the Defiant said over the comm, her weathered face showing a mixture of relief and suspicion. I don't suppose you'd care to explain how you located a ship that vanished without a trace in the middle of disputed space. Sometimes diplomatic channels yield unexpected intelligence, Marcus replied smoothly. I'll have a full report for the Admiralty within the week. Morrison's expression suggested she didn't buy it for a second, but 3,000 saved lives. Bought a lot of forgiveness. Understood, Ambassador, though I suspect this report will make for interesting reading. As the frigates escorted the Esperanza back toward human space, Marcus and Lyralay faced their own reckoning. They stood in the dream's heart, the ship singing contentedly around them as she carried them back toward the council station. What happens now? Lyralay asked. The council will demand explanations. My people will question my judgment in revealing our capabilities. Your superiors will want to know how you really found that ship. We tell them the truth, Marcus said, or at least part of it. That cooperation between species can achieve the impossible. That human chaos and Sylathi order create something greater than either alone. We have a year to build that garden, I promised the Wanderer. She moved. Closer, her hand finding his. Through their neural link, amplified by their growing bond, he felt her hope and uncertainty in equal measure. You said it yourself. Made you realize perfection isn't always about order. Maybe it's time the galaxy learned that lesson too. He pulled her close, feeling the dream's approval wrap around them like a blessing. Partners? In all things, she agreed. Though you realize this will cause a diplomatic incident, a human ambassador and a Sylathi princess publicly acknowledging a romantic partnership. Good, the council needs shaking up. Besides, we need to normalize interspecies cooperation if we're going to meet the Wanderer's challenge. She laughed, the sound like silver bells in a cosmic wind. You're going to turn our relationship into a political statement? I'm going to. Turn our relationship into a revolution, Marcus corrected. Starting with the truth that fear of the different keeps us apart, but courage to embrace it makes us stronger. The council station appeared before them, its crystalline spires now familiar as home. But as they approached, Marcus's communication array exploded with messages. Janet's voice cut through the chatter, professional, but with an undercurrent of amusement. Ambassador Chen, the council, is in emergency session. Someone leaked sensor data suggesting unauthorized use of classified Sylathi technology in the neutral zone. Also, Princess Lyralei's absence has been noted, and questions are being asked. Should I prepare a diplomatic response? Marcus glanced at Lyrelei, who was already straightening her robes with regal composure. Tell them the truth, Janet. That human Sylathi cooperation just saved 3,000 lives and uncovered a threat to every spacefaring species. And that Ambassador Chen and Princess Lyrelei will address the full council within the hour. Together, sir, together. Communication cut off, probably so Janet could process this development. Lyrelei raised an eyebrow. Bold, you're going to cause quite a stir. That's the plan. The Wanderer gave us a year to create a garden of interspecies cooperation. Can't do that by following the old rules. They docked the Dream in her private bay, but made no attempt to hide their arrival. By the time they reached the council chambers, word had spread. Dozens of species representatives lined the corridors, watching with expressions ranging from curiosity to scandalized shock as the human ambassador and Sylathi princess walked side by side. The council chamber itself buzzed with tension. Delegation was present, even the traditionally reclusive ones. Marcus noted with grim satisfaction that even the Korthax seemed intrigued despite their earlier confrontation. Esteemed colleagues, Marcus began without preamble, standing at the human platform with Lyrelei beside him, a breach of protocol that sent whispers through the assembly. 3 days ago, the human colony ship Esperanza vanished in the neutral zone. Today, all 3,000 colonists are safe and returning home. This was accomplished through unprecedented cooperation between humanity and the Sylathi harmony. He gestured, and holographic displays showed carefully edited footage of their encounter, enough to prove the Wanderer's existence without revealing the full extent of their experiences. For 3 centuries, ships have vanished throughout the galaxy. We now know why. An entity we call the Wanderer has been collecting unique specimens, preserving them against entropy. It took our ship because humanity represented something new. It returned our ship because Princess Lyrelei and I proved that cooperation between species creates something even newer, possibilities that no single species could achieve alone. The chamber erupted. Accusations flew from the Korthax about treaty violations. The hegemony clicked an alarm about unknown threats. The Shard Collective resonated with harmonics of concern about dimensional instabilities. Through it all, Lyrelei stood serene beside him, her presence lending weight to his words. When the chaos finally subsided, she spoke. The Wanderer issued a challenge. In 1 galactic year, we must prove that preservation through cooperation exceeds preservation through isolation. This is not humanity's challenge or the Sylathi's. It belongs to all of us. Her voice carried the harmonics of absolute conviction. Ambassador Chen and I have already begun meeting this challenge. Our species' combined capabilities allowed us to achieve what neither could alone. We invite we challenge every species here to find similar partnerships. And what of the treaty violations? Growled the Korthax Alpha. The unauthorized use of technology? The breach of neutral zone agreements? Marcus met the Predator's gaze steadily. We saved 3,000 lives and identified a threat to every ship in the galaxy. If that violates treaties, then perhaps the treaties need revising. The universe doesn't care about our territorial disputes when entities like the Wanderer exist. Silence fell. Then, unexpectedly, the void-touched representative spoke. The human speaks truth. We have long sensed disturbances in the dimensional fabric. Now we know their cause. This threat transcends politics. One by one, other delegations began to voice agreement. Not unanimous politics never were, but enough to shift the momentum. By the session's end, emergency committees were forming to address the Wanderer threat and explore cooperative ventures. As delegates dispersed, many approached Marcus and Lirelei, some with congratulations, others with questions, a few with barely veiled threats about the precedent they were setting. Through it all, they stood together, their bond visible to any who cared to look. Later, in the relative privacy of the human embassy, Marcus finally allowed exhaustion to show. He slumped in his chair while Janet briefed him on the political fallout. 17 formal protests filed, but 43 requests for cooperative meetings, she reported. The Admiralty wants you court-martialed and decorated simultaneously. And Princess Lirelei's presence here is causing the Sylathi harmony to have what I can only describe as a collective emotional breakdown. All in all, a successful day, Marcus said dryly. Janet's expression softened. You saved those colonists, sir. And whatever else happens, you did that. After she left, Lirelei emerged from the inner office where she'd been managing her own political crisis. 3 of the Harmony's matriarchs are traveling here personally. I haven't seen them leave the homeworld in centuries. Trouble? Change? She corrected, settling beside him with the fluid grace he was coming to love. My people resisted instinctively, but even they can't ignore what we achieved. A few are even intrigued by the idea of human-Sylathi technological collaboration. And personally, any regrets about binding yourself to a chaotic human? Her hand found his, their neural connections sparking to life. Only that we have just 1 year to build a garden vast enough to satisfy an entity older than stars. We'll manage, Marcus said with confidence he didn't entirely feel. Humans are good at impossible deadlines, and Sylathi are good at making chaos into harmony, she added. Together? Together. Outside the embassy windows, the council station continued its eternal dance. Ships came and went, carrying news of the Wanderer's challenge to every corner of the galaxy. Already reports filtered in of unprecedented cooperation, hegemony drones working with human engineers, Shard collective consciousness interfacing with Korthak's battle computers, a dozen small experiments in unity. The garden had begun to grow. 1 year later, Marcus stood in the same void where they'd first encountered the Wanderer. But this time, he wasn't alone. The Harmony's dream was accompanied by a fleet unlike any in galactic history, ships of every member species. Many of them hybrid designs that shouldn't have been possible. Lirelei stood beside him, her hand resting on her swollen belly, where their child grew the first human Sylathi hybrid, living proof of what the galaxy's cooperation could achieve. Around them, the dreams sang with joy. Her consciousness expanded by integration with human AI systems. Think it'll be impressed? Marcus asked, watching the assembled fleet. In 1 year, they'd rewritten the rules of interspecies cooperation. Technologies had merged, cultures had blended, and the galaxy had taken its first steps toward true unity. We're about to find out, Lirelei said, as space began to twist. The Wanderer emerged from dimensions beyond naming, vast and terrible as before. But this time, Marcus felt no fear. They'd built their garden. Now they would see if it was enough. The entity's presence touched every mind in the fleet simultaneously. For long moments it simply observed, taking in the changes wrought in a single year. Ships that sang in harmony. Minds that touched across species barriers. A child growing who embodied possibility itself. Interesting, the Wanderer finally spoke. You have exceeded parameters. Growth through unity rather than isolation. Preservation through change rather than stasis. This paradigm warrants further observation, and you'll honor our agreement, Marcus asked. More, your garden grows beyond expectation. I will tend it. The shocking revelation rippled through the fleet. The Wanderer, collector of the unique and preserver of the rare, was offering to protect what they'd built. Continue this growth. I will watch. I will preserve not through collection, but through guardianship. You have taught an old entity new. Harmonies with that, the Wanderer faded. Yet its presence remained a guardian in the void, protecting the unprecedented unity the galaxy had achieved. We did it, Lirelei breathed, wonder in her voice. We started it, Marcus corrected, his hand moving to rest over hers on her belly. The real work is just beginning, she smiled. That expression he'd first seen in a crystal corridor now was familiar. As breathing, then we'd better get to work. my chaotic human. Together, my harmonious Sylathi. The fleet turned as one, heading back toward the light of civilized space. Behind them, the void no longer seemed empty, but full of infinite possibility. And somewhere in dimensions beyond human understanding, an ancient entity hummed a new song, one of chaos and order intertwined, of preservation through growth, of gardens tended by gardeners who'd learned that the greatest strength came from embracing difference. The stars sang. And for the first time in eons, the universe sang back in harmony. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.